There have been many changes with operating systems over the years. The most recent change that Microsoft is doing with Windows 11 prompted me to switch to Linux. And I'm not really going to go into great detail on why, requiring a Microsoft account, the data security issues, among others. Everyone can have their own reason and purpose. The point of this video is to explain to people who may not be very tech savvy or are tech savvy but not interested in learning a new system, what it's like to use Linux, and more specifically, what steps you actually have to go through to set it up. It's not as simple as just turning it on and installing and you're switched over. There is a little more to it than that, but it's not as complex and intimidating as a lot of people think it is. Anytime you switch from one operating system to another, whether it be going from Windows to Mac or vice versa, if you want to try it out, there actually are a couple ways you can just do a boot off a thumb drive and run it off that just to test it out for a little bit. Another option would be to switch out the hard drives and run it on a different drive, test it out, see if it's working, see if it does what you want, and then either do the actual change or switch back. One issue some people have had is in the BIOS, there's a system that Windows puts in there called Windows Security. Unfortunately, the different motherboard manufacturers all have different layouts and requirements and systems on how they set up their BIOS. I can't really give you a hard, fast, do it like this, because different manufacturers may have different verbiage in different situations. If you have any problems, look for security. Usually it's called like Windows Security or just boot security. Just some options that you may need to disable to get it to run. You want to make sure you back up your files first. And it's a good idea even if you're just switching out the hard drives. What can happen, especially if it's an older drive, but I've seen drives quite spontaneously go out when people start dealing with them and doing different things, swapping out components. It can happen, but you do not have to learn the command line or terminal as it's called in Linux, same as OS X. You don't have to memorize all these commands, do all this different stuff. GUI or graphical interface has come a long way, and in many ways I would say it's like Windows. It's different obviously if you're using a different operating system, and there'll be some teething, you're getting used to the other process, but if you can get through that, you'll probably find it's nicer. It's a lot lighter on system demands, system requirements. Just food for thought. If you want to watch the rest of this, get a feel for what it's actually like and some things you need to do when you set it up that I've not seen other sources reference, it might make it a little smoother for you. Some things I learned along the way. Okay, I wanted to make a recording of what it's like to set up Linux for the first time. This is not about how to install or go through any of those steps. There are videos on that. I know a couple people who are interested or curious, but they are intimidated by the thought of learning a new system. First, let's understand a few things of operating systems in general. Anytime you go from one to another, there's a learning curve. If you go from Apple to Windows or vice versa, it's a learning curve. Going to Linux will be the same way, but it is not like Linux used to be. When I first decided to go to Linux, I intentionally did not learn any of the command codes and terminal interfaces because I wanted to make sure it was something that my wife could use. Because I didn't want to have to constantly fix things for her. She would get frustrated, I would get frustrated, and you don't have to. There are some things that are going to come up with the interface that is going to be very easy to fix, and I'll show you how to get around that. You don't have to memorize anything. It's really quite simple. This computer, I installed Linux. This is the first time it's coming up and logging into it. As soon as I can, I will get a screen recorder to load up, which will be easier to see and follow, because I never liked the old point the camera at the screen method, though there are some times that is required. But this is your initial setup. It's asking you what kind of settings do you want for the dock, which is basically the bottom interface here. I personally prefer the dark, floating, centered. I don't like the workstations and applications buttons, so I just turn those off. I'm not going to go into a lengthy explanation of what all of those are. I'm just showing you this here. You don't have to mess with any of that stuff. You don't have to do this. These are all options if you want, or if they're applicable to your computer. That's the initial setup. It's going to ask you to reboot it because it's going to do some updating in the inside. But real quick, I really recommend going into settings right away. And under power, at least while you're setting it up, turn all of the shutting down and power saving modes off, because I have had it in the middle of trying to update, suspend and shut down things, causing the system to crash. It's irritating. I have encountered this with Windows a lot as well. Back to Windows 95, they had all this stuff on by default, especially if it's a mid or lower spec system. 95, ME, Windows Vista definitely did this. Others would as well. So don't think this is just a Linux issue. I don't want anyone to try to post or say, oh, see, Linux isn't so. I've had it happen to all of them. They go to sleep, you try to recover them, and then they crash and shut down on you. In fact, I had a Windows machine go to sleep. You know, they start off with a 60-second timer. You're going around making changes. If you forget about it, it then suspends on you. Couldn't tell you how many times I look away from the computer, look back, I went to sleep. It's like, shoot. Get it to recover. It crashes. You reboot it. The system corrupted, and the whole thing failed because some update was missing. Something happened. And so you're having back square one trying to do an install. Fun. Good old days. So that is just an irritation of this process. It happened more often with lower end systems, but it did happen. Depending on your interface connection with the monitor, sometimes you will need to come in here and tell it what your resolution is. For example, it does not know what this other monitor is, but what you can do here, obviously I have two monitors, and scroll down, it'll give you the resolution options, select what you want, apply, making sure they're both visible, select what monitor you want, and hit primary, set it for your primary. That's where your dock will be. I think everything else I can wait until I get the screen recorder. I'll give you a preview. We have what's called Pop Shop, your little launcher here, little rocket ship. This is Pop OS, if I didn't mention it earlier. There are numerous Linux distributions. Each one's a little bit different. But this is how you install programs in Linux. You simply type in the name of the program, select it, and press install. It automatically installs. You don't have to download anything. You don't have to look for a particular version or update. In many ways, this is simpler and better than both Apple and Windows. And I can attest to that because I have work support for both. With the screen recorder going, you'll be able to see a little bit better. The Pop Shop, sometimes called the launcher, what this is it's an interface to basically update the computer, install new programs, etc. When you see the little red circle with the 1, it's saying that it has updates. click on the 3 horizontal lines, update and install software, and it's going to say it has a bunch of updates. This is for the operating system specifically. You want to try to do this as quickly as you can. Sometimes, because it's running on automatic updates, whatever was pretty much in that version when you installed it, however up to date that is, and depending on what type of hardware you have, it's going to be running on preset default drivers that may or may not be compatible. I have had times there was system instability until it got fully updated. Try to do this right away so the system doesn't crash, freeze, etc. Again, I've had this happen with Windows. As an old habit from Windows 3.1 and DOS days, I don't like doing multiple things on the computer when it's updating or installing things. I know you can, I just get very cautious on it because I'm used to things fragging. But there's several programs here we actually don't need. If you look through here, you see calendar. I don't need it. Obviously you can use it if you want. I like stripping out every last little thing I don't need. So while it's installing these updates, you can go through and uninstall any other applications or programs you aren't interested in. Kind of a funny story. When I first switched to Linux, if you've seen any of the Linux challenges done by Linus from Linus Tech Tips, I switched shortly before he did. So when I saw his challenge, I thought, oh, watch this. What happened was the bug in Pop! OS that happened that had his system crash and fail when he tried to install got me as well. That is a bug. It happens. And when my install failed, I did not blame Pop! OS or think it was a bad one. Part of me wondered if it was something that happened and it corrupted when I was installing the install drive. But my main reaction was shrug and, oh, it failed. I've had it happen to Windows a lot. So admittedly, I probably installed Windows, well, operating systems in general on computers more than most. So I saw a lot of failed installs for various reasons. It may not let me uninstall these other programs while it is installing, which is fine. I'm going to go over some basic customization. Some information here. This is, some call it the favorite, some call it the dock, some call it dashboard, and it's actually called a couple different things here. You can just right click on it and select remove from favorites, and it will be removed from that. If you want to add a program to it, go into your main list of programs here. This is show applications, main list of programs, and you can select one and say, take weather for example. Right click, pin to dash. That will add it to the dashboard. And if you would decide you don't want it, right click, remove from favorites. Voila. That's how you can add or remove programs to your dash or favorites. Going back to the Pop Shop and tell it I don't need to use this. Click on the uninstall. Sometimes you'll need to put in an admin password to uninstall some of the programs, and sometimes you won't. But the big thing I want to make sure you're aware of is installing some of the dependencies. There's a program called Wine, W-I-N-E. Once you get your system updated as much as it will go, you want to install this. And it's the top one here, which is called Wine. It's not developer version or any other stuff. What this program is it stands for Wine is not an emulation. I think they just wanted that name there and invented that kind of as they did it, because no matter how you try to think about it, it doesn't quite make sense for a name. It's not an emulation. What it is, yeah, so they're not happy. What it is an attempt to make the software, when you tell, for example, a video to play on a Windows computer, it doesn't just play. What happens is the operating system says, hey, this command was asked to do something. What is that? And it starts going through its different cycles to determine, oh, that's a AVI file. Go ahead and play that. Oh, wait, I can't play AVI file because I'm Windows Media Player. It will go to a program that can, at least in theory, and play it. All programs do this, whether it's a video game or any other function, really. And so the operating system is perpetually jumping program files around with different commands to what's being asked to access. It tries to translate those into something Linux knows how to do. Imagine two different languages being spoken. English and French, or Spanish, or German. They don't know what the other one's asking for. So it's attempt to translate it, and for the most part, it does pretty good. I one time had a computer, I forgot to install Wine. Something happened and it didn't get installed, and I was having all sorts of really strange problems. Color changes on the pictures and on the display, all sorts of oddity things. I'm doing all this trying to figure out what is going on. Posting on message board, trying to figure out if anyone else can figure out what's going on. It finally hit me one day. I forget why I was scrolling down. It occurred to me, Wine is missing. I installed Wine and everything was fixed. All operating systems come with some pre-installed programs, take a variety of forms, but Linux is going to be very light in that. To install, if you're on the main page of your Pop Shop, the variety of programs here you can just click on and go through. This is just a general list of popular programs, all sorts of stuff. Or you can do a search. And let's suppose you're not sure what the name of a program is, but you want a program that does something specific. You could say, oh, I want to play a video or a video file, or I want to be able to convert video files of different formats. You can literally just type in video and see we have video downloaders, we have video players, we have video trimmers, we have these are all programs free. Some of them I have seen will have a free version, and you can purchase to get the full unlocked. And the list goes on of all the different programs to either burn, which is really a nice program if you want to burn CDs or DVDs. You got burner there. And some of these programs are so simple, so light, which can be a problem. To be perfectly honest, some of them have a very rough user interface. It's basic. It does the thing you wanted to do. If you wanted a polished, nice looking interface, but it's utilitarian, it does what you want. Discord. Oh yeah, Discord. I need Discord. Let's hit install. And there it is installing. And now Discord is installed. So let's go clear that. And let's go back over here. Updates and installs. Discord. And they say, well, no, actually, I use it on my phone. I don't really need it on my computer. I was just curious. So we can, of course, it has information on the program. send feedback, help, homepage, and we can uninstall. Sometimes it takes a few moments. 2 things you really need to do when you first install Linux. Well, 3. Other than updating it and getting it up and running. Second thing you need to install is Wine. And again, this is intended for people who either want to look at Linux as possible switch, or new and want some basic information. So we're not going to go into command code. We're not going to go into, of course, it's called terminal here. Often I call it command line. What I think is interesting is Apple and Linux call it terminal, whereas Windows calls it command line. Part of me wonders if the Linux people knew Apple called it terminal as well. Would they then change the name because they have to be different? Linux has many different distributions, many different versions. We're doing the Pop! OS version here, which is put out by System76. Nice group of guys and girls. System76.com is their service. And this is not any kind of sponsorship paid or anything like that. It's just, I've found this operating system I have not used them all. I've not worked with all of them. This is just one that I think is a little more user-friendly. Again, focusing on new players. You can buy computers through them. All this stuff's preloaded and pre-set up. So that's all well and good. But you need to come here because we are running their operating system. So there's a couple things we need here, and I want to make sure you're aware of and familiar with for the second thing you really should do. Under Pop! OS, this is information on the operating system specifically. Scroll down to the bottom. You'll need Pop! Chat. This is basically their chat forum. You can create an account and post questions. They do have people that monitor it and will get back to you and post questions. There is a community there, and I have helped people with other things. I've seen people post a question. Mainly what we're looking for here is Pop! Docs, documents. If you have a problem, if you're having some kind of issue, try doing some searches in the documents first. As a courtesy, don't go to the forum and say, how do I turn on my computer? This is, I'm sure you're going to be very frustrated with whatever the issue is you're having, but understand it's not necessarily a huge problem for everyone. And somebody else has had this issue before. So see if you can resolve it on your own, at least try. What really irritates tech people is when people become dependent on us and calling us constantly. I knew one person who'd turn on his computer, it would pop, this was a Windows XP machine way back when, and Windows XP would just throw up this error code because it didn't like a particular part of hardware. I can't remember what or why it was, but it would just pop up this error code, and the person would call me every day and ask me, it threw up an error code, what do I do? We discussed this yesterday, and the day before, and the day before, and the day before. It says this, right? Yeah, that's what it says. Hit okay, and you're fine. Oh, okay. That irritates us. That is what will drive us crazy. Try to show some initiative and independence and figure something out on your own. If you tried on your own, you were not understanding the information, or you weren't able to find what you were looking for, and that happens. Sometimes you just don't know how to word the question. What do I need to do this? And if you don't have the right verbiage in there, you may not find the right question. I've had a couple times where I spent quite some time just trying to figure out, okay, what question do I need to ask to answer this problem? That happens. at least try on your own to say you put some effort into it and then ask. All right, what we're going to do, there's a couple things to look at. Mainly, we need media. Watch videos and play music, MP3, DVD, etc. This is the second thing you need to do, because by default, there's actually going to be a lot of things stripped out of Linux, because it's only going to give you the features you want and or ask for. So click on this, and what this is a series of instructions in terminal you're going to need to do. Don't get intimidated. Don't freak out. Follow the instructions. It'll walk you through it. Telling you, very simple. Okay, this command right here, we're going to highlight. Right click on it, copy. Open up terminal. You can't do the shortcut paste. You have to do the mouse right click to paste into terminal. I don't know why that is. It's going to go through and run these commands. It may take it a while to process through, and is literally installing the dependencies and functions to be able to play video files. Now this one, if you hit tab, it'll highlight. Tab will go to the agreements. If you look over here, it says it is right there. Once you're done with that one, you're going to move down. Again, select the same thing of the next command. Copy. And you're just going to be going through and doing all of these commands in sequence, letting each one run. Some will take several minutes, others will be very fast. And this is as much as you're going to need to use terminal. You're going to find a document. You don't need to memorize a bunch of commands. You don't need to understand a programming language. A lot of things you're going to see online, it will talk about, commands and interfaces, and some of the things you can do with Linux. Yes, terminal might be faster, but it's not going to be as user-friendly, and you don't need to learn it. The main reason I went to Linux is Windows had crossed several different lines with me, and I said, that's it, I'm done, I'm out. I have a few Windows machines because I need them for different things. I'm actually trying to switch over basically my server interface to something else, which I'm not going to go into a lot of stuff on that and why. I'm sure somebody will go post, but why would you need to do that? What's going on? Why did I just do that now? It's like, I'm not going to explain everything of the infrastructure and structure and reason and why. At the end here, you're going to have a command basically will tell the system to reboot. You can reboot on your own. You don't have to run that command if you don't want to. And then it's going to tell you to install VLC. VLC is a video player. That's all it is. You can use that one if you want to use a different one. VLC I find to be simpler and easier. Those two things, installing Wine and installing this one, will then let your computer be able to play DVDs. It will be able to play video files without any problems. Everything's going to be pointing where it needs to go, so you should be fine. Other things you can look up in Pop Docs. Okay, you can go up here, top here. There, you just hit back. And you can come up here and look up gaming. Gaming on Pop OS. This is going to go into a lot of stuff on video games. Steam, you want to go through those steps and it'll walk you through. It's the exact same thing. Run this command. You're going to see this. It's going to ask you for this. Just follow the document. one step at a time, going down the list. Couple things I do want to point out: you don't have to do everything on this list. Depending on what you're wanting to do, you may not even need to do this. Again, if you're just looking for a web browser, word processing, this is going to be a non-issue. But if you are wanting to do some of those stuff, go through all the steps of setting up Proton, Game Hub, Lutris. What these are basically applications that will help convert a game to run on Linux and function within that. There's also Bottles and a couple different ones. Some of them work better than others depending on the game. A really odd thing I ran into a while back, and this is on Windows, running older games that are supposed to be compatible on different ones. Sometimes it depends on the hardware you're running it on. This is years ago. I was running a lot of retro games on Windows 7, and I was having a really odd collection of success and failures. One computer couldn't at all run these XP games under Windows 7, and others computers could, and without a problem. And I was scratching my head trying to figure out why and what is going on with this. Well, I finally realized it was the CPU. Intel CPUs wouldn't run these retro games. AMD would. Something in the firmware. I don't know if it had to do with the structure of the core, firmware, the number of cores. Your guess is as good as mine. I could not get them to run. And I mentioned it to somebody else, and he was like, no way, that's not possible. I don't think he was necessarily a Intel fanboy or anything like that, but he could not believe that Intel would have some kind of error or problem like that. I'm like, all I know is this. I've had similar problems. Under Linux, my wife's computer, I could not get to run some Windows-based programs with the different applications under Lutris, for example. It was like pulling teeth trying to get it to run on my wife's computer. My computer ran no problem. Some firmware tied into the hardware, drivers, etc., may run just fine or a lot easier. Others, you're struggling and fighting trying to get it to do it. So understand there's just a whole host of variables. There's no guarantees on any of this. This is largely referring to retro gaming, older stuff that has not had a proper port or conversion made for it. In Lutris, if there are games you're trying to run, a lot of the times you can install it, and I've seen 4 or 5 different versions of it. It'll ask you, and you try one, try the other, try the third, and just go down the list and see which one works. And if it works for it, it'll run fine. There may be something unique to your hardware configuration that makes it harder. Again, this is nothing against the operating system, programming the drivers. There's so many variables under the hood that some combination you have may not be supported. They either haven't run across that, nobody's tried to do that, they don't know what adjustments need to be made for your situation. So you can have that happen. It's fun. I have seen it. I've run across it. There was one game I really liked to play. I could play it for about 40-45 minutes. Then I would start having all sorts of weird graphical artifacting and stuff, and the system would just destabilize and crash. So I could play it for 40 minutes, no problem. Funny little situations. I kind of wish I got some video of that, because you'd see trees rotating, flipping under the ground, spinning around, horizontal axis, there's a tree flipping around. It was interesting. But yeah, that's basically what all these are. And I'm not endorsing or recommending anything. It depends on what you want to do. With Lutris, basically you would go into search, go into the library, what your different options and stuff are. And I've used the program quite a bit for 1 or 2 games. Well, three games. So I'm not an expert. I have not gone into the GOG, the Humble Bundle, all the other ones with that. So I'm not sure if some of those would work better. I've just messed with what little bit I know. So I'm just trying to pass along the information for what I tinkered with. Not recommending anyone specific. You do not have to go through and install all of these. Just you can pick out 1 or 2, try it out, work with what you want. I heard Lutris, I forget if they were merging or another group that was making a compatibility layer on there, and I'm trying to think if they were going to, I've not heard anything, if it's going to be merged together, continue to be supported, just switch over to the other program. I heard something on that. I've not heard anything more, and it doesn't really matter actually. At any rate, all that said, media is the one I really want to make sure you're aware of. Once you get all those installed though, you should be fine. And again, for new users, once you get used to going through these documents, copying the commands in and going through that, it gets easier. It builds up your confidence a little bit, and you go through and understand you're not going to break anything. It's not like the old days of computers. I wasn't in that level at that time, so I didn't know the person firsthand, but I knew somebody who knew somebody kind of thing, who did make one mistype and deleted a bunch of important data. Then you got to go through and try to rebuild the data, the files, all this different stuff. It's not as delicate as it used to be. If you delete something, it goes into a recycle bin. You can always bring it back. In fact, I'll show you that real quick because it doesn't, unlike Windows on the desktop, it does not show you, oh, this is where your recycle file is. And if you clear it out of that, then it's actually deleted. Because what happens when you delete something, it goes into the recycle bin in Windows or trash in Linux. Click on the trash, it'll show you any deleted files. Because there is not a desktop reminder, Windows has a graphic change that'll show you, oh, this is full now. So you can go through and delete that, or you have something in there. I've had times where I forget. You come in here and you have a bunch of stuff sitting in here, and you can just clear this out. And it has a little button in the upper right corner, hit empty. Empties everything out, and you're good. So I just want to make sure you're aware of that. So if you delete something and you realize you didn't mean to, or you need that back, you can come in here to trash. With the terminal, there's not, if you put in a wrong command, it's just going to tell you it doesn't know what you're talking about. It's not going to, okay, I shall now go through and thoroughly destroy your system. Now, if something pops up that you're not sure about, it's asking you to confirm, you probably don't want to, just to make sure, because that has gotten some people, some verbiage in Linux is different from other operating systems. So you may not realize what it's asking you. And that can get you into trouble. You think you're making a simple change to your system and it's referencing multiple files, and you meant to just change one file, and then you find yourself wiping out an entire library, fragging your operating system, etc. So you have that as a potential, but again, if you're paying attention, don't do that. On that point, it is always a good idea to back up your computer systems and files. If you don't have a lot, a really simple way I used for some years is get a high capacity flash drive and just use that, just do a quick copy paste and move everything over into that operating system. And what you can do is just come in here to home. If you knew everything's in documents and music, pictures, and videos, and there's nothing you have any of that. You could just hold down Control, highlight those operating folders, copy, and then click on your external drive, flash drive, whatever it is, and just paste and move it over. Problem solved. If you have a server, you're probably not even needing the information I have here, so I'm not going to explain all of that. It's just a nice way to have your stuff copied elsewhere so you have a backup, because obviously hard drives fail, hard drives go out. I have a video on that, taking apart hard drives. So if there's any questions or problems on that, you know, you have that as a simple way to back up. I am not going to go into the intricacies and advanced features and functions on that. That's not what this is supposed to be. But basically, if you wanted to switch to Linux or try it out, that is a way to do it. If you're wanting to try it out and you don't want to do the whole switch yet, there is a simple way to do it. You can simply take a flash drive with install, and it will tell it to boot off the flash drive, and then it will let you kind of try a few things out with the operating system. It won't damage your programs on your main drive. You can also get a second hard drive, simply switch them, try Linux out, go over all this different stuff, see how this works, and then if you're comfortable with it, switch, actually keep that drive and either go with the other one, transfer all your files over there. So you have all that as options. Another reason you may want to have at least a system that is running Linux is Windows. Going back to Vista, they implemented a really stupid protocol that basically said, no, you cannot format this partition. If it's a Windows boot partition, it is sacred. It cannot be formatted. I cannot tell you how many times I've had to wrestle with Windows where I upgraded a computer, got a new drive in there, installed everything up. The old drive I wanted to use, I think it was part of a media library I was trying to put together. I was going to JBOD configuration with files on it. And Windows said, nope, you cannot format that drive. It is a Windows boot partition. That's sacred. Even if it's an older version, it would not allow me to boot it. It would not delete that partition. And there are programs you can use to do that. There are programs. If you want to just destroy the boot partition, ZeroFill, Boot and Nuke are ones I've used in the past. I'm not endorsing any in particular one. I'm not even sure if some of them are still around, but there are programs, and you install them on a flash drive, tell the computer to boot off of that flash drive. It won't engage Windows. It just loads up this limited operating system, boots this up and says, all right, what do you want me to do? And he's like, destroy that partition, and it will destroy it. Erase all the data on it. You can then install Windows how you want, or something else with it. But if you have Linux, you put it in an external drive box, plug it in there, load it up, nuke that partition, basically, format it into whatever you want, and you're good. That was one of the reasons I had a Linux machine in my old office, is I want that to die. Just want to make sure you're aware of some options and basic functions and features and what you can do with them. But that is basics of Linux.